Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to this week's Matterloading session. I'm Nina.
I'm Kyle. You might be listening to this because you're preparing for the second day of the IDC tomorrow, so we see you. But you might also be listening to this just because you want to keep yourself updated. Either way, thank you for making us a part of your Matterloading routine. Today, we recap the week by talking about South Korea's vaccine rollouts, China's courting of the Taliban, a plunder case happening right now in Malaysia involving a former debater, Hidilyn Diaz's win, the SONA, an effort to sanitize controversial religious figures, so that's my jam. We're also gonna talk about Simone Biles and also updates on the Free Britney movement. So we can start now with South Korea's vaccine rollouts.
Yeah.
Nina, could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so we're gonna look at the international sphere for a moment. So we'll start with the slow rollouts for South Korea's vaccines. And this is interesting because South Korea used to be the model in dealing with COVID-19 and all of its issues. But suddenly, with its vaccine rollout, it's fallen behind in being that role model for everyone else. And this is harmful because the country has only been able to give vaccines to people in their 50s. The expected waiting time for a single dose is 111 hours, 23 minutes, and 52 seconds. That's on average. Obviously, those numbers are not going to be the same for everyone. This meant that there's a bottleneck of more than 400,000 people before the new person gets vaccinated. This means that the path to herd immunity is fairly slow for South Korea because only 34.9% of 52 million people have received their first shot. Not even their second shot yet. We're just talking about their first shot. This is slow compared to the 55% to 70% vaccination rates in other developed nations. So South Korea has hit basically a record high with additional 1,672 cases per day, which is harming a lot of their economy as well as the people on the ground.
Yeah, so I feel like this is a bit debatable in the sense that the reason why there's a big bottleneck is basically the fact that let's say you lined up to get a vaccine and then all of a sudden there's this person who is of a certain age or higher and then they come in and they ask for a vaccine, they get the priority, so they're allowed to cut in line. So I feel like that's where the bottleneck comes from. And the thing is, if it's harming that much people, that many people, right, it brings to mind the debate about who should we prioritize, because these people that are being prioritized, they are definitely the most vulnerable people to the disease. But at the same time, if it's costing the efficiency of the entire system, then it's harming more people. So should we prioritize the most vulnerable or should we prioritize the most number of people? So this is sort of like which side gets more utility. So it sounds like a classic debate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's also happening in the Philippines with our classifications and our tiering system, while other countries just like give vaccines to whoever wants it, especially if there are high levels of vaccine hesitancy. I'm not sure what the hesitancy rate in Korea is, but given that not a lot of old people are getting themselves vaccinated, that they can't move on to the other age brackets, probably means there's a bit of hesitancy that exists there.
Yeah, so I guess now we can talk about the next one, which is the next story, which is about China courting the Taliban. So Nina will talk about this, but let me just give a brief rundown of the facts. China is stepping up their diplomatic power by welcoming Taliban forces in Tianjin, which is a city in northeastern China. And China has had talks to the Taliban and has extracted a public pledge from the Taliban that stated that the group would not allow any of their fighters to use Afghan territory as a base to carry out attacks inside China. So you can see that there's a difference here with regard to how the United States and China has dealt with it, because both of them have gotten promises basically from the Taliban. It's just that when the US was in charge, the Taliban promise is, we're not going to use Afghan territory to, topple the government. But with China, it's more of like, we are not going to use Afghan territory to attack China, okay? Like, we don't really care about China. So China seems to be filling up the power vacuum left by the United States. So when it left, it's now apparently acting as the mediator in the Afghan and Taliban conflict. And you can see the difference in approach here. The Taliban has also shown signs of being open to more diplomacy, given that they've also visited other capitals such as Tehran, Moscow, and Ashgabat.
Yeah, so this is where we talk about hegemonic stability theory or hegemon stability. What happens usually is that when a hegemon leaves, you don't just expect the vacuum to be filled by systems and by the local governments doing things properly. It's usually just filled with another hegemon. And in this case, with the US leaving, China is stepping up their game basically to have more power within the region, especially since it has the opportunity to do so. So in the absence of one hegemon, just, another one rises. In this case, it's China. And this is a classic debate. I'm pretty sure every time you've talked about the US interventions, whether or not they should intervene or whether or not they should leave a certain country and pull out their troops, China or Russia always comes up. And it's a meme at this point, but reality shows it's always true. And in this case, this is another instance that you can use to support that kind of argument, stating that that's likely going to happen, and it has happened, and it's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, but make sure that there is make sure to have actual matter behind it, because usually you just listen to these arguments and they go oh, China and Russia will swoop in out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, even if they do sweep in. I don't know.
Nagwalis sila.
But even if they do intervene, right, there's a reason and there's something for them to gain. In this case, I feel like China has two things to gain. It's still trying to build up its economy, so having more partners and more people to trade with basically just means more chances of winning. But it also means that they're beating US at their own game. So it's a political battle, it's also an economic battle. So there are reasons why China would be interested in this region. You just have to make sure you flesh it out the next time you debate about this, or if it ever comes up. So that's it for the Taliban and China. I think we can move on to Malaysia now. Pretty interesting. If you don't know who Saddiq is, hopefully this will give some light into the topic. So Saddiq used to be a debater and is now a member of Malaysia's parliament. And they pleaded not guilty after being accused of criminal breach of trust and misappropriation of funds belonging to their former party, Persatu. It was 1 million ringgit, or almost 12 million pesos, that was cashed out without the party's approval. The breach of trust was allegedly made during a donation campaign during the 4th general election. The charge, if proven guilty, would require them to, under Section 405 of the Penal Code, have 10 years in jail, caning, and a fine. So this is interesting to me because did I read that right? There's caning, hitting someone with a cane?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, you might think that if you see caning, they're gonna hit you with a cane. No, it's not really a cane, right? They during Holy Week when people used to, whip themselves.
Penitencia?
And then you see those little sticks with a lot of
thorns and stuff.
Not thorns, but those little leather straps.
Oh.
Yeah, and then there are some thorns in it, or
depends on
sharp.
Depends on how hardcore you want to be.
Depends on how hardcore you are, but it's basically like that, a small whip.
So why is it called caning if they're not using a cane?
Yeah, I don't know. But the point is, Malaysia does have a corporal punishment system, and that in itself is quite debatable. So I personally do not think that corporal punishment is ever a good thing to do. But I don't know, it might be a cultural thing. I suppose, in the Philippines, you would see people going yeah, we should have something like that for our dirty politicians as well. But I do not know enough to say if Saddiq is actually a dirty politician or if the charges are true. My focus here is, I feel like there's a greater problem, which is that people don't think that it's legit. And people think that it's politically motivated. The thing here is, no matter who it is that will be prosecuted, it will be seen as a political move. And the reason for that is that there isn't a lot of perceived independence between the Attorney General and the public prosecutor. So the prosecutor is the one that prosecutes, accused criminals. So people who are accused of crimes. Sila yung oh, this is the charge, we're going to give the evidence against you. But the Attorney General is the lawyer for the government. So in the Philippines, it'll be called the Solicitor General. So basically, the Attorney General helps out the government. In the Malaysian system, those two roles are fused together. So whenever someone gets prosecuted for corruption, the party that controls the government is seen to be the one that orders it, or is the one that's, pulling the strings. So this is why you have this perception that it's all politically motivated instead of it being true justice. In the Philippines, by comparison, the ombudsman independently monitors all three branches of government. So there is some sort of independence there. So I feel like we're marginally better, but you can also understand why there might be some hesitations, because the ombudsman is appointed by the president, and while the president can only appoint from a short list of candidates written up by the Judicial and Bar Council, or the JBC, a lot of the members members of the JBC are also appointed by the president. So you can see that, like, our system tries really hard for there to be independence, but like in practice, you can sort of see why it's not as independent as would be ideal. But at the same time, like, what would be the alternative for it?
Yeah.
You know? Which brings us to the local part of our episode. The local news. The first thing that we have to talk about, and you know, this is like the absolute no-brainer topic for this episode, is Hidilyn Diaz. So Hidilyn Diaz won the Philippines' first Olympic gold medal in women's 55 kilogram clean and jerk weightlifting in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. This has ended the 97-year gold medal drought of the country. So Hidilyn Diaz is set to receive more than 50 million pesos. Last I checked, which was yesterday, it was like 53 million or 58 million. But she's getting a lot of money worth of incentives from the Philippine Sports Commission. 10 million comes from the PSC because of Republic Act 10699, and we tweeted about this before. But they're also getting more than that from the country's richest people. They would also receive a house and lot, and also free rides at free plane rides. Because if I just say free rides, it sounds like a Disneyland thing.
Yeah. They also have free like only food in Vikings, like buffet, all she cans. In Vikings. Yeah, that's amazing. So more than this victory, it's also very political. So Hidilyn was placed, for example, in the Oust Duterte matrix and the drug matrix. I am usually very confused whether it's the same thing or different things.
It's two different things but merged into one matrix.
Yeah, so they assume everyone who's doing drugs also wants to oust Duterte or something.
Yeah, actually, like, that's the problem with that. One of the biggest problems with that matrix isn't even the fact that it was built on, like, really shitty investigation. It was also, like, very ill-conceived.
Yeah, like, basically, it didn't make sense. But, you know, this was very political, and it placed Hidilyn in that list. Ever since, you know, Hidilyn has forgiven the administration in 2019, and said that she prioritizes the peace of mind that she gets from forgiveness. Duterte has said she should put the past in the past, but Harry Roque, being Harry Roque, you know, rejects that this is even the past, denying that Hidilyn was tagged in any important matrix, like trying to collectively gaslight the entirety of the Philippines that this list did not exist, which kind of goes against Panelo, who, you know, says that, you know, she did it, she was in the list and she should own up to it. So even her government's not coordinated in who they want to target. So it's just annoying. It's very sad, and you know, like the moment you succeed, suddenly all of these things vanishes, which is very typical for Filipinos, I feel.
The sad thing for me is that it's not unexpected for Harry Roque to try to gaslight us into believing something. But so definitely it could be considered red tagging. If I was in Hidilyn's position, I'm not sure if I would have forgiven you know, them for putting me in the matrix. But the matrix. But also, don't let them revise history, right? So like, Hidilyn might have forgiven, but we don't have to say that nothing bad happened at all. Actually, I'm quite pissed at like forgive and move on narratives, because it places the burden on the victims to forgive, to forget, to move on. And Duterte and this administration never even apologized. So like, even if you're looking at, for example, the Marcoses, when they go like, let's just forgive and forget, let's move on. Why would we move on? No one ever said sorry. No one ever recognized that a wrong has happened. So I feel like we have a tendency to expect people to just jump to forgiveness without like recognizing that it is a process, and we shouldn't put that process solely on the victim.
And even if one person forgives, in this case Hidilyn has forgiven, doesn't mean we should all forgive. Like, we all have our separate feelings about the issue. We all have been affected by the red tagging in one way or another, you know, because it showcased that any individual, no matter how good their intentions are, can be seen badly by this government. So it obviously hurt a lot of people, right? So anyway,
what if someone goes like, why are you so affected? You weren't the one on the matrix. To which you have to say like, yeah, but why did you get so mad at Pinoy, for example, when he like didn't do so well at addressing the SAF 44? Like, that's not your SAF 44.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, you have the right to say, yeah, fuck this. I'm not personally affected, but fuck this anyway.
Yeah, like this is a really bad system and we should go against it. Anyway, but that's the first part of what's political. There's also another thing political about all of this Olympics thing going on. And that's Hidilyn's coach, who is a Chinese individual named Gao Kaiwen. And they received massive criticism from the Chinese weightlifting team because they did not disclose the maximum weight capacity Hidilyn could lift. And they feel like it affected their performance as the Chinese contingent, that they only won like silver in that category. Hidilyn has also disclosed in an interview that the win was for the West Philippine Sea and referred to it as RC.
Why was this a big deal? Like, if you're a Chinese coach, do you have a responsibility to tell China, like, the person that I'm coaching is so good now. She really improved.
Well, it's not controversial if it were any other country. But China is known for literally raising babies to be gold medalists.
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
They have an entire culture about like winning the Olympic gold. Anything less is horrible. So there's a real big sense of nationalism that if you're Chinese, you have to help in this initiative. Regardless of who hired you, your allegiance should still be to the Chinese team.
So like, the only problem here is that Gao Kaiwen did not tell China that, my girl got much stronger than before. So that was the thing, like, hindi sinabi na mas malakas siya now as compared to before.
Yeah, and I've read this article that there was a lot of game theory that went into it as well. So in the weightlifting category, it's not just about how much you can weigh, it's also about like the timing of how much you declare you can weigh. So it's a psychological battle as well. So the advantage Hidilyn got was actually the fact that they got to carry last, right? So their goal was only to always one-up China, right? So it was a psychological battle, like, okay, I'll declare I can only lift 91 at the first part, even if Hidilyn could weigh 94, because they wanted to see how China would match it. And then from there, they kept escalating until I think China declared they could do 126, and then Hidilyn was like, I'm gonna do 127.
Yeah, alam ko, it's just 1 kilogram difference.
Exactly.
So I think it was like 120 and something, and then it's just +1, and then I was like, that's how she won.
So that was like a big mind game as well, and that's why it's also very political. Yeah, so that's it for that issue. I think though what's funny about all this is that I know so much inadvertently about Hidilyn Diaz, but nothing about the SONA, which took place on the same day. Like
literally the same time.
Yeah, literally the same time. It got overshadowed, and for good reason, because I don't think the SONA was pretty good. And I remember a time where I would watch the SONA every single year, because not only was it a class requirement, but there was actually good things to be seen and bad things to be seen that weighed each other out.
and then you would take notes, and then you'd go like, they're gonna ask about this in tomorrow's class.
Yeah, or a quiz.
So I am going to talk about it.
Now I don't know what the children and students take away. But anyway, the SONA was held in July 26 and was the longest SONA delivered by any president post-EDSA. It lasted 2 hours and 46 minutes. The first part of the SONA was about a plea to increase compensation for military personnel and for more salary so people involved in the drug war. Not surprising, not new, been there, done that.
It's debatable as well.
Yeah, super debatable as well. I don't think they should get any more money, but that's just me. And this was immediately followed by a 30-minute rant regarding the harms of communism and the necessity to destroy them, to improve the economy in the state.
Which is weird, right? Kasi remember Duterte ran on like being the first leftist president, and he even went so far as to go like, mabuhay ang NPA. He literally said that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's political. People change their allegiances. Look at Harry Roque, used to be the defendant of the West Philippine Sea and stuff.
And also human rights.
And also human rights, especially with their different cases, and suddenly they're just like someone else's lapdog. Am I in trouble for saying things like that? Will I get in
just
trouble?
say that like you were exaggerating when you said
I'm exaggerating. I'm exaggerating. Of course, you're not a literal lapdog. You are a human being. Things like that. Whatever will get me out of legal trouble. But anyway, after like ranting about the communists that Duterte used to support but now hate, Duterte's biggest achievement was then the next part of the spotlight, and this was about the war on the oligarchs, where he boasted new contracts that were presented to the administration by the Ayalas and Pangalinans, which is weird because these new contracts were vague but were aimed to replace old contracts that were disadvantageous to Filipinos. So like it's a very mixed bag in my opinion.
Yeah, and despite it being the longest SONA, the speech was still heavily criticized, as we have just criticized, due to its lacking of discussion of COVID updates. And like this is the priority of the Filipino people. When they were surveyed by Pulse Asia, what do you care about? Most of the people people said we care about COVID updates because it's severely restricting our freedoms, our mobility, our movement, etc. More specifically, they wanted to hear the creation of more jobs. So 40% of people under that survey wanted to hear about jobs. The national economy, only 17% of the respondents wanted to hear about the drug war. Communism was not even a part of the priorities listed in the survey. So this actually reminds me a little bit of the problem that Trump had, because Trump did try to restart the economy, but at that point, people, Americans didn't really want to focus on, fixing the economy. They wanted to focus on fixing the pandemic. So when Duterte did talk about the pandemic, it was actually worse than what Trump was doing, because at least Trump was like, oh, we got this, and he just makes fake news. Duterte said that I really don't know what to do. I have to listen to the task force. So like, it was very defeatist. It was very uneducated. Like, it assumes that you haven't already listened to the task force, because if you had, then you wouldn't just be like, I don't know. So the other relevant remark he made was that a new type of lockdown would be looming over the Philippines, though.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, just this morning, they announced that there would be ECQ. There is a modified community quarantine right now for 5 days with heightened restrictions. So it's a weird trial period, and then suddenly we'll go back into being locked down. So I'm basically stuck here with Kyle for the next month. Not that it's a super bad thing, but like, again, we couldn't predict any of these things, and that's the difficulty. Like, how do you make long-term plans when just left and right there could be lockdowns that you're not anticipating?
Yeah, and the problem here is you don't really feel like that much of it because you are in a place of privilege, and I am also in a place of privilege. But for people who literally have to go to work in the morning because they're blue-collar workers, they are going to be so harmed by these like constantly changing policies.
Especially given that it's not NCR plus, it's just NCR. So imagine if you're living in a place outside of Metro Manila, yet you work in Metro Manila. Like, what that do? How you work? How you go around?
How do that?
Like,
you do teleport.
Yeah, you have to somehow do teleportation or live in Metro Manila so that you can still keep your job, or otherwise the people who are in Manila get, I don't know, they get special privileges all the time as usual, and then people in the peripheries just have to deal with the consequences, which isn't fair.
Yeah, that's true. I think now we can talk about religion. So I'll probably talk about religion.
You talk about religion.
Because this is my jam. So Nina didn't really know about this because, she doesn't really look at Twitter, but I do. And I like looking at the trends. So like every day you see a bunch of K-pop trends, you see a bunch of like TV show trends, you see a bunch of Hockey League trends. But last week it was sort of special for me. Well, special because I saw trending hashtags about the Bible. Hashtag truths from the Bible. And like yesterday there was another hashtag about truths from the Bible. It wasn't truths from the Bible, but it was about the Bible. And it overshadowed another trending topic, which is about ending child rape. So it's a big deal, apparently. So why did these hashtags come up? You might be confused about why they became trending, but the reason why it became trending was because it is an effort by Ang Dating Daan, which is a religion here in the Philippines that is, a sect of Christianity that believes in a more literalist interpretation of the Bible. Basically, what they believe is that if there is something that is not in the Bible, do not believe in it as part of your faith. So a good example is the Trinitarian conception of God. So you know about this, Nina. Like, all Catholics know about this. Like there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They are three personas in one God. So the people from Ang Dating Daan say that, oh, that's not true. Like there's nothing in the Bible that says that that's true. So they reject the Trinitarian conception of God, but also they say that, the true God is God the Father, and Jesus is just lesser compared to God the Father. Kaya siya truths from the Bible, because they get everything from the Bible, even if the Bible might be outdated. So one of it is like, should you tell your child that they're adopted? And Brother Eli Soriano says, well, you should tell them when they're old enough to, bear fruit.
Is that really what the Bible says or something?
Yeah, like, you should... I think what the Bible said in that context was you should let your child make their own decisions when they are able to bear fruit, quote-unquote fruit. And then this was spun to say, like, if you're of the age of majority, you know the difference between right and wrong, you're at an age of discernment.
Wouldn't it be fair if I interpreted that as being able to plant some fruit. if they're gonna be literal, like, you tell them the moment they're able to plant fruit.
I thought that the spin was sort of unfair because, like, in context, the reason why they were talking about fruit was because it was in the context of marriage. So that Bible verse, in my opinion, as someone who studies the Bible as well, is meant to say that a person should get married when they're able to have children. So, you know, it says a lot because, like, children can get pregnant
at 12 or 11.
Yeah, or even earlier, right?
Yeah, it depends on your cycle.
Yeah, so I understand why they had to change that. But if you look at just the Bible, it's very outdated. So if you're getting just from there, it gets a bit wonky, in my opinion. This is my religious opinion.
Very strongly held religious opinion.
Anyway, the reason I wanted to bring this up is that a lot of it is quotes from the recently deceased leader of Ang Dating Daan, which is Brother Eli Soriano, which is a bit problematic for me because it feels like an attempt to sanitize his legacy. So if you're a law student, you might know that Eli Soriano was in some cases about freedom of speech and freedom of religion because Brother Eli Soriano had a radio show where he constantly criticizes other religions, like calling them sons of horse, you know, like worse than Satan, spawns of Satan, stuff like that. So I don't really feel bad about calling them, you know, outdated and stuff because that's just my religious opinion, no? Anyway, the MTRCB once prevented his program to defame and curse out Iglesia Ni Cristo members. But Eli Soriano also has a bunch of libel cases. And he had a rape case where it was alleged that he raped the Assistant General Secretary of his church. And while a lot of these cases, including the rape case, was never ruled upon, it is worth noting that he refused to appear in court and actually escaped to Brazil. So when he died last February in Brazil, like, everyone was mourning. Like, even Duterte sent his condolences, and he didn't even do that for his predecessor. So I'm a bit scared to call this out because they might say, oh no, I'm defaming their dead leader, to which I say, well, I'm just saying literally what happened. Like, there's literally like a case about rape where there were certain allegations, and although he was not, you know, declared guilty, the fact that there are allegations and that we're trying to forget that by starting up new hashtags is still a red flag for me. So speaking of red flags, let's now how am I gonna spin this into the next story? Speaking of red flags, I feel like if you're going to shame someone for not doing something due to mental health reasons, that is a big red flag. Which leads us to our story about Simone Biles.
Okay, that was a good attempt. I feel like a better transition would have just been to be about, like, you know, people on social media, not always reliable, can be used to sanitize, can also be used to criticize, which leads us perfectly to Simone Biles.
So we have two different transitions to the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like mine's better. But anyway, Simone Biles, we all know her. They're gymnasts, and they left the women's gymnastics finals at the Tokyo Games on Tuesday because they weren't in the right headspace mentally to compete, they said. It's not clear whether they'll still compete in the individual events. It doesn't seem likely, but as Team USA star, she was expected to bring home gold medals, and the weight of those expectations loomed over her. So on Tuesday, she said she began to fight all those demons and couldn't hold them back and therefore had to step down. And this Olympic Games, they said, I wanted to be myself when I came in, and I felt like I was doing it for other people. End quote. Biles said it was the biggest upset for the US at the Tokyo Games. But, you know, I feel like just talking now about mental health, I don't see anything bad about what they did. If they weren't in the proper headspace, then it's fine. Even if it meant Russia was gonna take home the gold, it's just a medal compared to a possible life, compared to a lifetime of, like, your feelings, compared to as well how you view yourself. But obviously Twitter had a lot to say about it. Like, suddenly everyone who used to do gymnastics had like their own thoughts. Everyone who used to be an athlete in any capacity was like, oh, if I were in Simone Biles' position, I wouldn't quit. Like, that's the thing, sweetheart. You'll never be in their position.
My thing though is, most actual, like, athletes were in full support of that. So, like,
what do you mean actual athletes? Are there fake athletes?
No, like, there are people who, like, I do gymnastics as a hobby and I would never quit. The Olympics is such a big opportunity for me. Why would I do that?
Or they turned it to goofy.
It's not.
What
We're that goofy.
What accent was that?
I don't know.
But anyway.
But anyway, yeah, so most of the actual gymnasts that are very influential, like Caitlin Nohashi, who is the queen. Oh, I know stuff. She is the queen of the perfect tens because her most like important routines, she got perfect tens.
Nice.
And there were even times when before she would get higher scores than Simone Biles. It's just that because of mental health reasons, like she kept being body shamed by her former coach. She said, I don't want to be great anymore. I'm going to step down from elite, which is like a different category, I suppose, like like open and like the
Novice.
open and novice.
Yeah.
It's like that. The elite one is the super pro, and then she went down to a lower category, and she succeeded immensely there because she found a coach that was really good for her mental health wise. And she said that if you are not in a mentally sound position, this could have been life threatening. So basically, if you're saying that like, oh, you should just fought through it, that means like you would literally have her risk her life and she might have died in order to satisfy your perceived need to see someone else get a gold, which is like a terrifying thing for me. And people were saying like, oh, is she teaching the youth to be quitters? Is she teaching the youth to be quitters? So if something will literally kill you if you're not in the right mindset, and if you're going to attempt a life-threatening thing and you're not mentally ready for it and you think you might fail, I think it's right to quit. Like, stop this bullshit about never quitting ever. Because if it's really going to hurt you, or like you're scared that it might hurt you, it's okay for you to quit. Like, take some time, and you don't owe anyone anything. So if people go like, well, because she pulled out, she cost the United States the gold medal. But like, this is a team event. So if you are relying on just one person, then the problem isn't with the individual athlete. It's a team thing. It's a management problem, right? So speaking of management, let's move on to the next story, the last one for this episode.
We should really plan our transitions ahead of time.
No, I planned this. This is 100% my plan.
Okay.
That was a team management issue. And speaking of management, let's talk about how Britney Spears has all of her properties and her entire life managed by someone else.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
So Britney Spears has a new lawyer, is fighting up a fight for putting up a fight against the conservatorship. So conservatorship is basically the putting someone into a system wherein they cannot completely make all the decisions regarding their finances and regarding their own bodies. So we have this in the Philippines and also in most jurisdictions around the world, where if you are mentally incapacitated, like if you're a child or you have dementia, for example, someone can apply to become the conservator. And basically what they do is they protect your properties and they protect you from doing something that might jeopardize you.
I mean, that's the best case interpretation. Like, it's all for good intention, protection, etc.
Yeah, so she has been in the conservatorship for 13 years already, since 2008. So for people who were alive during that time, you might remember she had like a total mental breakdown. Oh, we could have used this as the transition of the mental health aspect. But anyway, I'm going back to the past. You never look back. It distracts from the now.
Ooh, end the mode.
But anyway, like in 2008, she had a mental breakdown, and that caused her to be put under a conservatorship to protect her from herself, her finances, etc. The problem is, even though she's gotten better, her father, who was like managing her properties, was preventing her from actually being free. So like, she could not do what she wanted in terms of work. So she was very burnt out with one like particular tour, and she said that she didn't want to do it, and as a result, she was forced to take even worse medication, stronger medication that really puts you in a bad headspace. She was not allowed to control her reproductive choices. She has an IUD inside of her, and even though she wants to have a baby, she can't take it out because it's against the terms of her conservatorship. But anyway, her father is also earning from this. So So the situation here is that they believe that Britney Spears is good and rational enough to earn money and pay her father $16,000 as compensation per month for managing his daughter's estate. But no one believes that she is rational enough to provide and act on her own self and make her own decisions. So that is the problem here. So this is where you get the hashtag Free Britney or the Free Britney movement that's basically trying to end the conservatorship. So the update here is she has a new lawyer putting up a fight for Britney Spears, seeking to remove her father, Jamie Spears, from the conservatorship that she has been put under since 2008.
Yeah, so there's a lot of progress actually happening already. This is the first time that, for one, she was allowed a lawyer, and that wasn't allowed before under the conservatorship. She had problems getting a lawyer for herself because the father wouldn't let her, but she managed to fight for that and say, well, that just doesn't make sense. If I can't even challenge this thing, what's the point of having clauses that let someone challenge a conservatorship? So it makes sense that those things exist now, and I think that, the more we see stories about Britney, the more that meme before makes sense. The whole leave Britney alone thing that everyone made fun of, it makes sense now, and I feel bad for being part of the people that used to make fun of that and used to not see the point. But yeah, it's a mental health thing. I'm glad society has evolved. I'm glad that we are now having conversations about mental health. Not everyone's on the same page, but that's fine. The same way that a lot of things, even if we don't think they're debatable, are still debatable to a lot of people. But that's the point of having these conversations. That's the point about learning more about the world. That's the point of Matterloading.
Wow!
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's it for this episode of Matterloading with Nina and Kyle. Once again, I'm Nina. Thanks for listening.
I'm Kyle. Thanks for listening.
Alright, we'll see you next week.
We still need to think of a way to end these episodes.
We'll figure it out. That's what we did last time. We'll figure it out. Anyway, bye!
Bye!